Yo, Big D here with a UFC 284 preview on the Big D podcast. Before I bring in my UFC friend, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Strickland Sports YouTube page. Yes, it is Super Bowl week, but we're taking a break for at least right now with the UFC episode. Back with more Super Bowl content. Also, check out the Big D podcast for all your audio listeners on Spotify and Apple. So, another UFC pay-per-view, which means Billy Ward is back with Fantasy Labs and Action Network. So, Billy, for the first time in since 2019, the UFC is venturing down under, mate. You know what that means?
Yeah, it's always fun when they travel to different areas. It seems like, historically that meant a bunch of squash matches for the local people. I'm not so sure that's the case this time.
Yeah, yeah. Usually be walkovers, but how about the main event for the lightweight belt between? Let me see. Let me see. I love these. I love these Russian guys. Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkan and wait, hold on. Let me see.
Volkanovski, you got it.
Alex Alexander Volkanovski. Thank you.
Yeah, it should be a really exciting one. Not only is it, Volkanovski stepping up to try to become double champ, he's the number one pound for pound fighter in the UFC, according to their official rankings and pretty much everybody else's. I think the UFC actually has Islam as number two pound for pound right now. One could debate that based on resume and all that, but we don't really have any dominant men's champions right now who've held the belt for a long time. So it's certainly a case to be made that these are the two top pound for pound fighters in the world at this moment, squaring off. They're only 10 pounds apart weight class wise, so it's not like someone stepping up in the sense of, Adesanya going up to 205, which was a 20-pound jump and didn't work out so well. So yeah, should be a really exciting fight, very important fight in terms of legacy and rankings and all that good stuff.
Yeah, first with Makhachev. I mean, when you think of 155-pound fighters, the first guy you think of is Khabib because, I mean, Makhachev and Khabib both came out of a similar Russian camp. But what's the difference between Khabib fighting and Makhachev's fighting style?
Yeah, obviously they're very similar. Makhachev is no blood relation to Habib, but they call each other brothers. Islam came up training with Habib's dad, as did many of the people around there. I will say, I think Islam has a little bit more diverse striking attacks. He'll get in there and brawl a little bit, throws a fair amount of head kicks. Not that Habib didn't do some of that stuff, but Makhachev definitely seems more comfortable there. On the flip side, I don't think he's quite as dominant of a grappler the way Habib was. We're really splitting hairs here. They're both, extremely solid grapplers overall. But we saw Makhachev against Arman Tsarukyan. It was Tsarukyan's UFC debut when they fought, and Tsarukyan gave him a real good run in the grappling exchanges. Tsarukyan was able to get Makhachev down. Makhachev got him down, but didn't really keep him there for too long, even from dominant positions. And my impression watching fights like that is Habib would have finished the fights from some of those spots where Makhachev just isn't quite as dominating and as suffocating with his top pressure. But again, can he make up for it in the stand up? I think that's where he excels a little bit over his more famous training partner.
Yeah, when you speak of stand-up, when I see Alexander Volkanovski fight, I mean, especially the three fights against Max Holloway, they basically turned into an hour and 15 minutes box. I mean, Volkanovski did try to take down Holloway in the last fight, but to me, Volkanovski wants this fight to be a boxing match, if at all possible, and not a ground match where Makhachev can just submit him from every angle whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. It's to a degree, this is a striker versus grappler match. I think both these guys are a bit underrated in the thing that they're not best at. Volkanovski, very solid grappler. We've never really seen him controlled on the ground. He's never lost in the UFC. His one career loss was like a million years ago in some regional fight. I think all the way up at welterweight was his only loss, but he's fought as high as welterweight as a professional. So I don't think he's a bad grappler. Yeah, he got head kicked at welterweight was his only career loss. He's not a bad grappler. No one controls him. People take him down, but he pops right back up. I believe he got caught in the guillotine by, what was that, Ortega for a little bit in there, but powered through it, got back to a dominant position, didn't get submitted. I don't really see him getting tapped here. Makhachev can do that to anyone, especially through the ground and pound. But this fight's really going to come down to not so much whether Makhachev can get takedowns, because I think he will, but how much control time, how much damage, how much can he score once he gets the takedown, because no one's ever really been able to keep Volkanovski down for an extended period.
Do you worry about Volkanovski? Two things that worry me about Volkanovski. One, he hasn't really delivered a lot of knockout finishes. Yeah, he'll get a lot of strikes, he'll put up a lot of points, which is great for DFS because we love points, but he's not a great knockout finisher. He almost needs like like a couple extra punches, and going up in weight class may or may probably doesn't help it but do you think that Volkanovski's, I wouldn't say power, but like repeated punches could potentially threaten Makhachev with the 10 extra pounds he'll be carrying on Saturday night?
Well, I'm going to start with addressing the size discrepancy here. I really am not that worried about it. Volkanovski is huge in terms of like muscle and strength. He's had a long time to prepare for this. He's put some muscle back on. I don't think Islam is especially that big of a lightweight. Point being with any of that, I don't think there's going to be a tremendous weight or strength disadvantage once they actually get in there. Again, it's only a 10-pound difference between the weight class, which helps to a degree. And Volkanovski used to be like a jack 200-pound rugby player. Like, this is not a man whose frame can't carry a little bit extra muscle. Additionally, everyone Volkanovski's fought almost has been either taller or longer than him. And Islam isn't huge. He's not some 6'2", 76-inch reach lightweight or anything like that. In terms of body proportions, this is really not all that different than anyone he's fought. He's almost exactly proportional to Max Holloway, former lightweight, a little bit skinnier than Makhachev, but height and reach, pretty spot on. So I'm not super worried about that, but you make a good point. I don't see him having a great shot at putting him away. Makhachev was knocked out in his only professional loss. He was getting there and there brawling with the jiu-jitsu guy. He's obviously not going to do that with Volkanovski. He's going to look to take Volkanovski down. But it can happen. He can be tested in terms of chin. If Volkanovski is able to get a finish, my thought would be it'd be like a real late. He's just worn him down, beat him up through all these rounds because Makhachev can't get takedowns. Even that seems like a real big stretch, though, because even if Makhachev isn't getting takedowns, he's going to be engaged in the scramble enough of the time that he's going to be keeping it going. As not a striking match, he's going to be keeping him engaged to the point where Volkanovski isn't just landing a bunch of barrages like he did against Korean Zombie.
How much do you think the Australian crowd will play a factor? Because obviously Volkanovski will have, what do you think, 99.99% of the fans supporting Perth?
Yeah, my pet theory with that is the only thing where it really matters is if the crowd overreacts to positive moments from Volkanovski and underreacts to moments from Makhachev, or insert any Australian or non-Australian fighter in here. I think it can sway the judges a little bit. I think we talked about it last time when they were in Brazil, but a lot of that home field advantage in other sports is because judges get unconsciously swayed by fans. So if it does go to a decision and it's very close, then I think it'll matter. But we have seen judges in other countries and far off locations do, in my opinion, a lot better job in the last couple of years, where 5-10 years ago, if you were a French guy fighting in France, you won if it went to a decision. I don't really think that's the case here. I also don't really see it being a close decision, not because I'm saying Makhachev is going to dominate, but if he can get and keep Volkanovski down, it's going to be pretty one-sided. If he can't, I think it's going to be pretty one-sided the other way. So I don't really see at least any individual rounds being up for debate. We might see Makhachev get takedowns early and then not late, or vice versa. But I think almost every round here is going to have a pretty clear winner.
Yeah, to be honest, the one thing I am looking at is the line because I know you look at the lines, and I can't believe Volkanovski is as big of a dog as he is. I'm seeing numbers like plus 315, and I'm like, what? Isn't he like the best pound for pound fighter in the world? Sure, he's going up 10 pounds, but to me, Volkanovski does not deserve to be this big of a dog. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you. I kind of had the same thought when Islam was fighting Oliveira, and we saw how that worked out. So
not good. Not
right.
good for the team.
Habib and all of his, various training partners, they have a way of making everybody look bad. With that said, if I'm betting a money line on this one, it's definitely Volkanovski at the odds. And, as we know or should know if you're playing UFC DFS, the salaries are pretty tightly correlated to the odds, which means we're getting Volkanovski at 6,700.
Woo!
That's extremely cheap for a guy with his work rate, unless you think he gets finished right off the bat. I can't see not playing Volkanovski. In tournaments, there's a different question because he probably needs a win. Makhachev might be a tough ask in tournaments at 9,500 if you can't get a finish or a ton of takedowns. But for cash games, yeah, you definitely got to play both of these two. Just the scoring potential in this one should be high. Which I will say, we haven't seen Makhachev in a 5-round fight. He's looked strong in third rounds.
I was going to say Makhachev has never been to a fifth round. Well, Volkanovski's gas tank is limitless. I mean, he and Max Holloway wail at it for 25 minutes every time they fought.
Yeah, and Volkanovski tends to get better deep into fights. I have zero questions that in terms of like physical preparedness, Makhachev will be in shape to do those rounds. But whether he'll burn himself out, whether all those intense wrestling scrambles, whether he'll get too excited given the gravity of the situation, I think those are reasonable questions. So from a betting standpoint, if you're going to bet Volkanovski, Volkanovski in over 2.5, Volkanovski by decision, Volkanovski 4th or 5th round, stuff like that is where I'm looking. But from a DFS standpoint, if we're thinking it goes late, that probably means lots of points both ways. Certainly a strong case for playing both guys.
What is the legacy for the winner of this fight? Because to me, I mean, Makhachev has got the chance to be the second coming of Khabib, but Volkanovski's got the chance to follow Conor McGregor and win the 145 and the 155-pound belt.
Yeah, for Volkanovski, I think we really make a case that he's the greatest pound for pound, at very least, MMA fighter of all time with the win here. Conor did it, yeah, sure. Never really defended either of those belts. They kind of, he caught guys at the right time. He didn't win any of those belts by fighting a top 2 or 3 pound for pound guy in the world at the time he did it. So this is, apples and oranges as far as I'm concerned. But it's really hard. I mean, it's probably more impressive than GSP coming up to middleweight and winning a title. Probably even more impressive than Randy Couture. Both those guys came back to fight up a weight class because they saw a champion that they thought was an easy matchup for them. That is not what Volkanovski is doing. Oliveira probably would have been an easier matchup for him. A lot of lightweight champions between Khabib and here would have been better matchups for Volkanovski. He's really going out there fighting the best guy they can find after having successfully pretty much cleared out the 145 division. The guys we have fighting for the 145-pound interim title on the co-main event here, they don't really seem like legitimate challengers or legitimate threats to Volkanovski. So he's cleared out that division in a way that McGregor never did. And now stepping up to fight for a heavier weight class title, I think he might very well be the best fighter of all time if he can pull this off.
Well, you mentioned the interim 145 belt, and to be honest, the co-main event does not excite me in quite the same way between Josh Edmond and let me see if I can get the other guy.
Yair Rodriguez.
Yair Rodriguez.
So I'm excited by it because it's going to be an awesome fight. Like I like both these guys, both real high paced. I'm struggling with it because one, there's no reason to declare an interim title just because Volkanovski is stepping away for one fight. If there was some guy who was clearly the number 2 fighter who really deserved a shot at it, okay. That's not what we're seeing here. Rodriguez is favored, but he's coming in on a win over Brian Ortega. He had Ortega in an armbar and Ortega's shoulder popped out. We could kind of debate whether that was a result of something Rodriguez did or a freak injury. I tend to lean towards that being a freak injury. An armbar is not an attack for the shoulder. Ortega was defending it. He was arguably winning the fight. Shoulder pops out. Not very convincing. Before that, he had just lost to Max Holloway. Emmett, on the other hand, more of a win streak, but his last win was a split over Calvin Cutter. I really had that scored against Emmett. If I recall correctly, I had a bet out on Emmett, and I still had that scored against him. So again, neither of these two really have me convinced that, should they win the title and Volkanovski comes back to 45, they're a legitimate threat. With that said, super fun fight. Like, ton of activity from both these guys, a lot of action. Both guys really good cardio, so if it goes 4 or 5 rounds, it's not going to be a snooze fest at the end. So, mixed feelings on that. We don't need to call everything interim titles, though, just because a guy's taken one fight off.
It's like what's going on at what is it, 205 now, where seemingly they have an interim title fight at every other pay-per-view.
Well, to be fair, at 205, that was just the title fight this time. Kind of feels like an interim with Yuri surrendering it. But yeah, it's just weird how they do that. Ngannou was on the shelf for more than a year. It only became not his title when he signed with somebody else, but they didn't call any of those interim title fights. Sometimes a guy, takes 2 weeks off and all of a sudden it's an interim title fight. So I don't know what's going on with that. Doesn't really matter. From a DFS standpoint, though, it's important because that suddenly becomes a 5-round fight. Fairly close in pricing, 8,500 for Rodriguez, 77 for Emmett. Like I said, both guys pretty good activity level, both averaging over 70 points a fight. I don't love putting in all four title fighters in my cash game lineups. You might have to here just because you see two fights where even the loser should end up with a good amount of scoring. Then it frees up some salary since, the combined salary is a little bit less than the average, and then you're good to go. Not 100% on that. I'm going to try to find a way to exclude somebody from there, but I don't feel confident enough in either Rodriguez or Emmett that I feel like I can definitely pick the winner here.
I feel like you've got to have all four title fighters too, because you're gonna leave out Makhachev? No. You're gonna leave out Volkanovski in the sixes? No. And I feel like for these two guys, whether it be at Emmett or Rodriguez, I feel like having both of them would just give me more safety. Yeah, it might be not be the sexy thing to do. Like if you're doing a tournament, you might have one or the other, thinking if one gets an early knockout or wins and puts up 100 and umpteen points, like what happened in the main event last week, then at least I've got both guys. I've either got this guy with this guy in a GPP lineup.
Yeah, I mean, for tournaments, you almost always have to have 6 winners in there unless like every favorite wins on the card. So yeah, you're gonna play one guy from either fight, mix in your Volkanovski when you're using other heavy favorites, blah blah blah. I think that one's pretty obvious. For cash games, if you have a strong read on Rodriguez versus Emmett, even a strong price considered read, one of these guys is a little bit too expensive or too cheap, I'm fine with just playing one of them. You just have to be a little bit more precise, and not miss anywhere else in your lineup. Because if you play Rodriguez at 8,500 and the other cheap guy you put in for Emmett gets outscored by 30 points by Emmett, win or lose, just gets outscored on volume, you're in a bad spot because a lot of the field's going to have both of the co-main event fighters.
So besides the four main event or co-main event finals, who do you think stands out as a really good cash play? Because I could think of a guy who stands out in my eyes. And
well, let me hear what you're thinking, and we'll go from there.
Oh no. You're gonna make me announce all these Russian guys. Come on, man.
Oh, which one is it? I'll help you through the pronunciation if you're unsure.
It's Zubahiro
Takugov. Yeah, I mean, right. Of course, the 9,600 fighter, massive favorite, is going to be a solid play. It's tricky though with Islam right there at 95. If you're playing the 4 main event fighters, that really puts you in a rough spot salary wise. So, if you're able to find a reason / excuse to fade Yair Rodriguez, you might be able to get there. But that's going to be really tough if you're playing all 4 of the title fighters. So I hear you. Yeah, he's obviously a good choice, but yeah, we want to play all the expensive guys. That doesn't mean we necessarily can. I'm building one now real quick just to see what you're left with if you go there. Might not be too horrible. Yeah, so if you play Takugov in the 4 title fights, 8,000 left, that's not horrible. I actually like Bagdasaryan, the 8,000 fighter, who would be the obvious choice there, though there's some other choices. As far as cheaper guys I'm looking at, I think Randy Brown at 7,000 is intriguing. He's really tall and long and awkward, and he's just kind of a tough matchup for anyone. He's a huge underdog here to Della Maddalena, who's just rolled through and knocked out everyone. But I think Randy Brown is one of those guys who, due to his awkwardness, due to his ability to mix styles and stuff, he could make this a lot more competitive than the betting line is, implying. So he's not a bad one if you're playing a cheaper fighter. Parker Porter and Justin Tafa. Parker Porter weirdly has a pretty safe floor just because he lands so many strikes. So unless he gets knocked out right away, probably will be okay. Not that I ever like want to play Parker Porter, but you know, for a cash game, not a terrible option. Probably not going to play Elise Reed. You know, we like those cheaper female fighters, but she's not good. Both of her losses have been stoppages. Both of her wins have been decisions. That's not a good sign.
Yeah, and we all remember what happened to the chief female fighter last week. Who didn't even fight it. Who didn't even fight on the call.
Yeah, fortunately, we got that news in time to pivot off of it.
Now I know we don't have a couple Australian fighters on the card, but which Aussie other than Volkanovski are you ready? Are you excited to see?
It'll be fun to see Jimmy Crute again. You know, he's kind of been not super active as of late. His last fight was a knockout loss to Jamal Hill, which, you know, people were a little bit down on at the time. That was, you know, a little over a year ago. Crute was favored in that one, but now that we know how good Jamal Hill is, maybe, you know, we look a little bit more favorably upon Crute than we did before. So that's an interesting one. You know, Kulibov versus Bagdasarian is pretty much a toss-up fight, so those are always fun. I actually really like Melsa Bagdasarian, very exciting kickboxing style. That could be a good fight. Jamie Malarkey is fighting a UFC newcomer. Jack Jenkins is a prospect I've had my eye on for a little bit, so that should be a good one too. You know, a lot of these guys, no one's really like must-see TV or anything like that, but a lot of these guys look pretty interesting. It seems like everyone in Australia is a UFC fighter at this point, like all the people who live there. So they just keep churning these guys out.
Tyson Pedro also fighting. I think he's fighting the maybe the best name in the UFC, at least one of the best names.
Modestus Bukauskas.
Buzakis or Buhakis?
It's Modestus Bukauskas.
Modestus Bukakis.
Yeah, I'm not super pumped about that one. Bukauskas was 1-3 in the UFC, including a knockout to Jimmy Crute. Bounced out, fought some lower level competition that's coming back. This is one of those like we're talking about in terms of trying to get the local fighter what should be an easy win. Whether it works out that way or not is a different story. Pedro was interesting, had like 3 years off, came back with a couple knockouts, but he knocked out Ike Villanueva and Harry Hunsucker, who are two of the lower levels among the big guy divisions. There's just not.
And I think Buzakis is also taking this fight on short notice because that was one of the fights where the other guy was where somebody was supposed to fight. Pedro was supposed to fight somebody, but he dropped out.
Yeah, I think it was early enough that I'm not too worried about it. You know, it's not like this was yesterday that we got the news, especially with these bigger guys. But yeah, I mean, sure, could be a nice knockout for Pedro if it goes the way his last few have, but not super intriguing. I don't really see a lot of high level potential from either guy. But Crute versus Menafield, you know, I mentioned Crute versus Menafield, somebody should get knocked out pretty quick. That's going to be the swing fight in my UFC article at Fantasy Labs. Like, someone's getting stopped. Not super confident who, but these are both two guys with a ton of power. Both have shown a little bit of ability to get knocked out as well. So, should be a fun one.
Now, before we sign off here, I do want to ask you about some more of the UFC development this week, where Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler are going to be coaches on the Ultimate Fighter Season 31 edition. I mean, having Conor McGregor as a coach is going to be pretty dang exciting, but what do you think? I mean, do you think Conor McGregor is just more a showman at this point of his career, or is he potentially or does he have anything left in terms of positive UFC fighting engagement?
I mean, I guess it kind of depends on your definition. I certainly don't think he's making a title run ever again. They're doing this fight the fight that follows the season is going to be at 170, which tells you how much bigger he's got. He's got no shot in there against Kamaru Usman, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Bilal Muhammad. You know, like there's some killers at 170. A lot of guys.
I think Conor would have a trouble at 145 and 155 now. There's no way he's beating Makhachev or Volkanovski. No way.
Honestly, stylistically of all those fights, not that he's ever going to make 145 again. We've all seen the pictures. stylistically, Volkanovski would probably be the easiest one just because it would be mostly a stand-up match. It'd be kind of like a Volkanovski Holloway type thing where McGregor could find that punch. All these other guys are just going to take him down. You know, Poirier made him look pretty bad on the ground. These other guys are certainly going to go through him. With all that said, Michael Chandler, pretty intriguing matchup there. I don't think Chandler uses his offensive wrestling nearly enough. I think if he was smart, he would go in there and try to take McGregor down and pound him out. But I think McGregor or Chandler at this point in his career is also more in it for big fights, big names, more so than an actual title run. So probably both these guys are going to be out there all swole, looking all strong, swinging real hard, see who falls first. That's my prediction for the fight. I believe the betting markets have it as about a toss-up at opening. I'm guessing that's going to go more towards Chandler as we get closer, just given the layoff and the injury and the total disinterest in fighting we've seen from McGregor lately. Really hard to make him a favorite over Michael Chandler, but you know.
I feel like that fight's going to be over quickly because you've got two guys who want to go at it. It's not going to be one. Like, I don't know what the first round knockout numbers would be, but I've got a feeling those puppies are going to be juice.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty safe assumption, but I don't know. It's fun, but you know, in terms of being like a real fight fan who wants to see the best guys going against the best, that one doesn't really do it for me. I'm gonna watch it, but like this is more for the spectacle than it is because we think either of these guys are challenging for anything significant. And good on Chandler too. You know, he's been getting called out by a lot of these up and coming 55ers. I think, you know, the Mateus Gamrot, Benny Dariush, Armin Sarukians of the world would absolutely slaughter Michael Chandler at this point in their careers. So I'm more excited about those guys coming up. Hopefully someone's willing to fight any of them because it seems like all the old guard is ducking them. But that'll be real interesting too if Volkanovski wins the 55 belt, because then maybe you do Makhachev versus Gamrot or Dariush or something like that. They tried Makhachev versus Dariush, but I'm going off on a tangent here. I'm sorry. Totally unrelated to the question at this point.
Hey, I mean that's part of our getting of a questionnaire. I mean, sometimes I go off on questions you ask me, or sometimes you go off on questions I ask you.
And that's, I will say, to kind of loop things back to UFC 284, that's kind of the beauty of this fight. You know, Volkanovski cleared out 45. Not that Makhachev had cleared out 55, he just won the title, but he's kind of already crowned as the next king and all this stuff. So no matter which way this one goes, it really opens up some possibilities. You know, if Makhachev beats him, we got these young and upcoming 55ers ready to challenge. If Volkanovski wins at 55, does he stay there? Does he go back to 45? What do we do with that division? So, you know, this was perfect matchmaking. Awesome fight, you know, gave the UFC the freedom to make kind of a lesser pay-per-view behind it, and all of us still be really excited for it. So, you know, that's why they're in the business that they're in.
So thanks for hopping on, Billy. We hope your bets and lineups this weekend go well, and hopefully we'll be dancing wallabies, koalas, and kangaroos Saturday night, Sunday morning with UFC 284 and the Super Bowl this weekend.
Thanks, Dylan.